Drew, thank you so much for taking time to participate in this climate talks. My name is Selva, and this is one of the an education and awareness series that I want to put together for anyone, particularly folks in India who wants to understand the ESG, climate, and sustainability space more. So, in this series of talks, I'm planning to talk to people who are working in the space, who have got experience in the space, to come and share their experience in that way. Like Dhruv, thank you so much for taking time to be one of our early participant, I would say. This is the first of its call recording that I'm doing. So thank you so much for that. Before delving into the call, Dhruv, it would be good if you can introduce yourself and give us an insight of what experience you have, and what you're currently doing.
Sure. Thanks, Selva, for inviting and really happy to be here. I've been working in the sustainability domain for about 10 years now. So worked across areas. I mean, I've worked in India, but then I've worked with global clients as well. So it's an exciting topic. And obviously, I started out as a chemical engineer, did some work in operations where I could see environmental and social aspects were quite important. So that's where, when I was taking up my MBA, I actually decided to specialize in sustainability. So that was also first of its kind. I was part of the first sustainability MBA program from IIM Lucknow.
Wow. Okay.
So obviously that was not very easy, given that we were doing everything in terms of placements, reaching out to companies and all those things.
Right.
And I think that is kind of symbolic of, where sustainability was in India, maybe 10 years back, where, there were things which were happening, but it was not really mainstream, right? So I think it's been an interesting journey. And I think post my MBA, I've worked mostly in consulting organizations. And that's a lot of experiences with clients, and happy to share, whatever I've learned. Because one key learning for me has been that you need to talk to people within sustainability, plus you need to talk to people across functions, because sustainability is a team sport. It's not like you are sitting in a silo and you are optimizing something for sustainability.
Right.
You need to work with different functions. You need to bring everyone on board. That is actually the key problem, right? Otherwise, we typically can approach something as a engineering problem or a science problem, but it's actually, a problem where you need to bring everyone together. That's the main thing.
Dhruv, thank you so much. Yeah, I kind of agree with whatever you said. Having a kind of chemical engineering background too, a decade back, when I was in the workforce, I really echo and second your thoughts. Sustainability was not that much mainstream, particularly in India, but now we are hearing more and more of it. And as you rightly said, it's not a siloed way of approach anymore. Back in my early days as well, when I started to work in the sustainability space, I would be the only sustainability manager in the entire organization, irrespective of the organization size. This was the case with many, but that's no longer going to be the case going forward in the future. And if that needs to happen, we need more and more folks come in. Thanks a lot about sharing about what you've done, Dhruv. We have some interesting questions that we wanted to talk with you. But other than that, if you think that anything related to this field that you wanted to bring in from your experience, please feel free to add. See, I wanted to actually focus on businesses in India, and particularly small, medium, and also the large enterprises, what they're doing. So what are, according to you, some of the key areas that businesses should focus when they want to be or become sustainable in the future?
So I feel, I've seen sustainability programs in different shapes and forms. And one thing which I feel is that your purpose of the organization should be very much aligned with the sustainability actions that you take up.
Right.
If it is very different, very disconnected, it typically doesn't resonate with your stakeholders, right? So let's say if you are a cement producer, now you have a massive environmental impact, right? So you need to do something about your product. At the same time, there might be mining, there are operations in remote parts of the world where, you're operating in a risky environment. So the actions which you take up should be related to your core operations and core business. That way, people who are employees, who are your suppliers and so on, they can actually connect with your actions in a much easier way. I think that is one. Other thing is for sustainability, I mean, no one actually does it purely from the goodness of their heart. If your sustainability actions are linked to, what the business is doing, articulating the value becomes much easier, right? Because right now, a lot of clients and their boards and their shareholders are asking for the value which they're generating through sustainability. So if your sustainability initiatives are linked to your core, that way articulating the impact of those initiatives, the value generated, that becomes much easier.
Right.
And that's how you build consensus, right? So that I feel is really important for businesses to focus on.
Right.
Another related aspect would be that you need to right size your ambition based on which industry you're operating in, which geography you're operating in. And that's where, I mean, if you have a massive impact in terms of water, but you're not focusing on it, that's where some stakeholder or the other will call you out, right? So it might be an NGO who's waiting to, highlight or scrutinize the large companies. So I think that aspect is quite important. And even for companies, who are mid-size and all, that's where they need to start somewhere. It's not like there will be regulation from SEBI and RBI, which will come down to, mid-sized companies and then you start working.
Right.
You need to actually start working earlier, because in a way, if large companies are, focusing on sustainability either on their own or due to regulation, the pressure actually goes to their suppliers, right? And those suppliers are actually the mid-sized companies.
Right.
So that's where you need to keep ahead of the curve so that you are not, I mean, I do expect like within the next 5 years, there will be a lot of companies which will actually, blacklist suppliers or reduce their business with certain suppliers if they see a sustainability risk with those suppliers, right? Because right now, it's more of an encouragement which is being provided to suppliers. There is a lot of upskilling, awareness creation which is being provided. But a lot of companies actually have their commitments in 2030. They've globally committed to something by 2030.
Right.
In a lot of cases, the suppliers are the key, right?
Right.
So that's where I think you need to get started, because if you haven't started, right, you don't have the people within the organization who can actually, talk about sustainability, actually convey it to other employees, convey it to the leadership. So I think that also is quite an important aspect.
Thanks, Dhruv. You summarize it like really, really well. And when we speak to like many stakeholders, most of these people who are like running businesses and building industries want to do good and want to do good for the people and also for the planet. So it's in their core value. And how do they actually bring into their governance structure and then take it into their business is something that needs to be defined well. And I also believe that there is like a lot of lack in education and awareness too in this space, particularly for many people who want to do. But then there's also some kind of like thoughts that sustainability and doing good businesses comes with an expenses. Whereas we are also like observing trends that there could be like a lot of cost saving opportunities too, right? By actually doing sustainable businesses. So with respect to that, Dhruv, I wanted to understand that what do you think that we should be doing to be able to create more awareness and education on climate change, to understand the risks across the globe and also for the businesses locally, and also to improve sustainability and reporting and ESG standards?
So I think that's an interesting question. I'll probably take it at two levels. One is like general awareness creation, and then second is more around procedural reporting, which is like process driven and transparent disclosure and so on, right?
Right.
So when it comes to awareness creation at a general level, I think that's where I see there are things happening. I recently had a colleague who mentioned like, so right now summer vacations were going on, right? And I stay in Gurgaon, and what he mentioned was like 80% of the holiday homework which their kid got was actually sustainability related in one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, getting kids to actually do a project, where they're saving water or they're doing recycling, at least introduces them to the topic, right? So that is one. Similarly, I think on the awareness topic, right now, given how social media is really relevant for the younger population, I think the sustainability concepts are really complex at times. It's very hard to dumb something down, simplify it, and get them to act. There are startups who actually have a strong social presence, and they are able to encourage people to change their daily habits and so
Mm-hmm.
on. So I think that part is something which is also helpful, but again, you need to make it fun given how the algorithms and all work. Now, just switching gears, right? If we talk about
Mm-hmm.
transparent disclosure, and let's say I talk about a company who's disclosing their sustainability performance, key thing which I see right now is that from 2024, in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of geographies, sustainability disclosures are actually becoming mandatory. In a lot of jurisdictions, the regulators were asking for sustainability related performance to be reported alongside the financial performance, which
Right.
means you are following the same timeline, which also means that you need to have the same level of correctness, auditability of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the European Union is a prime example where the CSRD regulation came into force from
Right.
1st of January, and it's the most comprehensive regulation till date.
Right.
And right now, individual member countries are basically framing their own laws. So by
Right.
July of this year, France was one of the first to actually come out with their law,
Right.
and they have a penalty, which is a monetary penalty, but they also have imprisonment. People take it really seriously, right? So
Right.
this is the new wave when it comes to sustainability disclosure, where if you have everything in one report, you actually improve on many fronts. So
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time, what was happening was there was a separate sustainability report, which would come out anywhere from 6 months to 18 months after your annual report has been completed for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can't really link your financial performance and non-financial performance. The quality of the report is most likely not the same because
Mm-hmm.
the level of auditing which it has gone through, the level of scrutiny which it has gone through is not the same. Even in India with BRSR, that's the intent. So I think that's a big change which is happening. And with that, I feel organizations now can't treat sustainability as an ad hoc exercise,
Right.
because similar to how financial reporting happens on a quarterly basis, you actually need to have your sustainability performance, you need to track your initiatives in order to be able to comply with the timeline. At the same time, I think the other best practice which is coming up is that your sustainability initiatives can't be totally unrelated. You are being asked that, how are your non-financial metrics linked to your financial performance and the other
Right.
way around.
Okay.
And how sustainability is impacted by your business model, the way your company is making money and so on. And I mean, there are n number of things which are being asked. So I think
Right.
those interrelationships between financial and non-financial, they need to be explored in much more detail now. I think that definitely requires more investment from organizations in
Right.
terms of their technology, in terms of their people, in terms of, I would say, the level of internal controls that you apply to sustainability, right? So it can't be
Mm-hmm.
that you have 5 versions of information floating around in the organization, which also I've seen is very common,
Mm-hmm.
because there is someone somewhere who's responding to a local regulator, then
Right.
there's someone who's responding globally. There might be someone who's applying for a award related to sustainability or
Right.
related to your HR practices. They have another set of data, right? So
Yeah.
that thing in terms of having a single source of truth is actually something which a lot of companies are now investing in, given
Right.
all of the challenges which I pointed out.
Great pointers there, Dhruv. Being in the space, like I've been like observing, things are evolving a lot, and as you say that the practice of reporting standards have changed over time, and I mean, companies having like different practices to report locally, globally versus like within internal should also change with time, so that there is like one centralized place where data is available for everyone to access, and they're able to produce reports that would talk to all of their stakeholders. Many companies are also now becoming more and more aware that commitment towards climate targets is going to be sort of like affecting their industry in a large scale, given that the risk associated with that, with respect to climate finance, migrations, disasters. It would also attract like more young staff members to the companies if the company is like more proactive and businesses are like, taking climate actions, etc. And the other thing you also touched about is about on behavior change, right? So currently I do work on this behavior change, and it's a huge challenge to make someone understand that what is an impactful and meaningful climate action versus like what they're doing in their daily life, and how that initially and immediately transfers into reducing carbon emissions, etc. So in that way, I still think there's a like long way to go, but I'm also like positive that it has changed a lot, particularly in India over the last 10 to 15 years. Courses that are being offered by institutions and also universities, there are more people who are actually taking up sustainability as their profession. There are like several global reporting standards like GRI, TCFD frameworks that are widely being adopted, and India also has this guidance of like BRSR reporting for top 1000 listed companies, which are mandatory at this point of time, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to scale it up and then make it mandatory for like other industries too. I'm now keen to understand specifically some of your key learnings while working in this space over the past couple of years with businesses.
I mean, if I were to summarize it in one statement, which I have actually heard from a couple of clients as well,
Right.
that is, sustainability should be sustainable. We often don't understand, or, we have a narrow view. Sustainability, there is a three-legged stool model of sustainability,
Right.
where, people will focus on environmental and social sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll forget about the economic part of it, right? I mean, if the business is not surviving, then there is no sustainable business to be called out, right? So there are a lot of activist NGOs which are there who will just scrutinize each and everything. So that takes things in another extreme. I think for sustainability professionals, it's about bringing businesses from, let's say, one extreme and some NGOs in another extreme to a common ground,
right,
where the sustainability actions can become sustainable. Other thing is, like, if I were to talk about a company and let's say we rate companies on their sustainability ambition, with 5 being the most ambitious and let's say 1 being someone who's only doing compliance, right? Whatever is required by compliance.
Right.
A company can decide that I'll operate at a 3, which is, let's say, average. Now, what is quite important is to be very consistent in, your messaging. I mean, the consistency is more important than the level of ambition. And then I think third point, which I would say, which is a big challenge for specifically sustainability teams within organizations, right? It's like they have to do everything everywhere all at once. There is something happening everywhere all the time, right? And as a sustainability professional, there is just so much you can do, right? I mean, they're not companies with a 100-member team. So even a company with 50,000 employees will not have a 100-member sustainability team.
Right.
They'll have a small core of people, and there is so much happening globally, right? So if you are a global company, there's so many regulations which are happening. There's so many NGOs who are, looking at what your company is doing. There are, consumers who are different. Consumer expectations are different. And even in terms of your functional depth, right? You, let's say, are focusing on climate risk, but then there is a new topic related to nature and biodiversity, where now, new standards are coming. That's where I think just prioritizing, having a priority of what you can take up in the, short to medium term, while you have a long-term roadmap, I think that is really important. I've seen a lot of, sustainability heads and their teams just being exhausted because there is so much to do. And typically, the level of budget, team, and so on, which they have is at a premium.
Wow. Excellent pointers, Dhruv. I think to summarize whatever you said, that the first thing you wanted to make sure is that sustainability should be sustainable. Excellent point there. And then the second one I like is about having that balance, not being able to go to one extreme or like sitting in the other extreme, to have the balance to make sure that, you make the right contributions in the right space. And then that also eventually leads to the third points that you said, that like prioritizing. And I think materiality assessment is a great place to start, to be able to understand what's important for all of your stakeholders. Here are like my 5 points that you said. That like prioritizing, having that balance, and then also eventually leads to the third point that you said, that like prioritizing. And I think materiality assessment is a great place to start, to be able to understand what's important for all of your stakeholders. Here are like my 5 different goals that I think that is commonly aligning with all my stakeholders, and what is something that I can achieve in this financial year, like in the next couple of financial years, and then starting to work towards that. Thanks for sharing that, like key points and key takeaways from this. Getting to some of the final set of like questions, what is one big challenge that you think currently Indian businesses are facing when it comes to addressing ESG and sustainability?
I feel Indian businesses, right? If I leave out a few, where maybe there was a founder who was a visionary, and that's where they've been investing in sustainability for many years, right? So if you maybe think of the Tata, if you think of Wipro and few other companies,
Right.
If I leave them aside, right, because those companies were actually doing sustainability, CSR before the regulations even came out, right? So, I mean, if I leave them out, the majority of the businesses are actually struggling with moving beyond compliance. The compliance level is maintained in majority of the cases. But to move beyond compliance, right, you need to demonstrate a ROI on sustainability.
Right.
And that's the harsh reality, at least in a developing world, where for any business, you'll need to show a ROI, and that's where either you are not able to demonstrate it,
right,
or there might be initiatives where the ROI is very hard to justify. Maybe the direct benefits are lower, there are indirect benefits which are there, and it's very difficult to demonstrate a ROI similar to how you would do it for any financial kind of a metric. Integrated reporting, which came out, was a good effort to actually ask companies to have a triple bottom line kind of a thing, where you convert your sustainability impacts into a financial value, and automatically, if you do a bottoms up, then even for an initiative, you can define some ROI for sustainability. So I think that's a big challenge which companies are facing. I would say like 2021, I mean almost 3 years back, was a time when there was a lot of excitement about sustainability, because globally we had seen a pandemic, and there was a strong narrative that this pandemic is kind of an indicator of the major problems which we have across the globe, and climate change kind of emerged as a bigger problem to be overcome, and there was a good amount of investment which came in. Right now I feel sitting in 2024, a lot of businesses have to actually justify what value they created through the investment which they got for 2-3 years before they get the next set of investment, right? So that part is something which is a challenge for a lot of businesses, not just in India, I would say even globally, because India was, I would say, balanced in terms of the recovery from COVID and the response. But there were economies like Europe, where you had the Green Deal, where there was massive investment coming in for sustainability, because it was like the economic recovery itself should be sustainable. So it was a conscious effort, which came in. But across the globe, I think, given that investment which came in, you need to justify the value which was created out of it. And then I think there is enough and more in terms of investment related to sustainability. So I think that's probably something, which within the next 1 to 2 years, a lot of companies would try to justify, because they're, companies who are raising green finance for their capex programs, right? And again, the same thing applies in a much more structured way, because there are funders who have funded a project because it is green, and maybe they agreed to have a 2% lower ROI compared to a typical investment. Now, to make up for that 2% lower ROI, you need to show the sustainability benefit, right? So making it much more concrete is, I would say, the challenge right now for a lot of companies. I feel that's the push that we need for 2030. So probably couple of years are a period where you need to prove that this is something worthwhile, this is something which is generating value much beyond the financial, and then you can actually power through till 2030.
To summarize, like again, from an economic point of view, sustainability should be sustainable on its own with respect to bringing in the right return on investments, and then with also like the global awareness that's growing, and also with respect to a lot of climate tech companies that are coming up, and so far, like the learnings and knowledge from other people who have implemented it successfully, I'm pretty sure that more companies will ramp up and then try to adopt best practices, and eventually it will start to produce that sort of like ROI to stakeholders. I know like we have spoken a lot, and I wanted to finally get one advice from you, particularly from your experience. What is something that you want to share with budding sustainability professionals in India?
Two things which I would probably want to call out, right? One, being multilingual, so to speak.
Right.
Because if you're speaking to someone in engineering, you need to explain things in a different way from, let's say, if you're having a CFO discussion, it's something else. Understand their priorities and then kind of reframe whatever you were already recommending. It's like tailoring your message to the audience is most important.
Mm-hmm.
I think one good example which I've seen over the last 10 years is that whenever you're talking to someone about tons of CO2, right? No one can see CO2.
Correct.
Now, no one can visualize what a ton of CO2 looks like, right?
Correct.
And when you're talking about climate change, right, you're talking about the global narrative around us reaching the threshold and so on. That time you're talking about gigatons of CO2, right?
Right.
So that is like someone is totally zoned out, right, when they hear a phrase like gigatons of CO2. So I think that's where making things relatable to someone, understanding, how they will understand it, that becomes really important. It could be something like you talk about, 1 ton of CO2 is what 10 cars will emit in a year, right? Or the amount of energy a house will consume. Something on those lines kind of makes it relatable for people. Second thing I would say is like growing your network is really important, which actually relates to my first point, because you need to cater to so many diverse audiences. You can't be a purely academic oriented person. Once you know different functions, you are able to speak with different people. I think that part is important. And that's where, as I said, right, it's everything everywhere all at once. Right. You can't be an expert on each and everything, but you need to have a network where you know that, if I want to learn about biodiversity, this is the expert who I need to talk to. So you need to have your network growing over time so that you can cover different topics. And often there is a lot to learn from what's happening globally, right? So it could be things in India which excite people globally. It could be the other way around. So having that network is really important. That would be my second advice to budding professionals.
No, thank you. Those are like very useful advices, because you have to explain things in different ways to a common man, to your CFO, as you said, and also to your CEO. So you need to have that sort of like storytelling skills. You need to understand the art of like what would make people understand and also resonate and relate to it. So it's important for us to look at ways in which people could visualize, so that they can clearly see, what it means. So yeah, thanks for that advice. And then the second one, of course, to build the network, it's particularly important, so that you are always in the know and being aware of things. With that, like Dhruv, thank you so much for taking your time to come and talk to us in this Climate Talks. This is like a small initiative that we are trying to do in Social Footprints as the organization that has been like helping me to grow this. The objective is to reach out to many more sustainability professionals and also to people who want to be in the space, in the businesses, to say that there are professionals and experts out there in the market who people can reach out to, and we together would solve the bigger problem of reducing emissions and meeting climate targets and creating a better world. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for talking to us today, Dhruv.
Thanks a lot, Silva, for having me, and I had a great time. Definitely, happy to have such conversations. When I kind of started, there weren't a lot of MBAs happening, right? So over the years, I've guided so many people who either joined my college or joined my organization and so on. So, everyone's motivation can be slightly different, but it always helps to kind of talk to someone and so on. So yeah, really thankful for this opportunity, and I hope it benefits your viewers.
Yeah, sure, thoroughly. I enjoyed the conversation, Dhruv. It rekindled a lot of important key points, that one should remember, and you shared like a lot of valuable insights as well. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Selva.